Hey Reddit, I could really use some advice. This whole situation has been building up for what feels like forever, and I'm not sure how much more I can take. It all revolves around my brother-in-law, Tim, 30M, and how things have spiraled out of control since he moved in with my husband, Matt, 32M, and me, 27F, after his divorce. To give you some context, I've known Tim for about 7 years now, ever since Matt and I started dating in college. From the moment I met him, Tim was always the life of the party. He's got this magnetic personality that just draws people in. You know the type, always ready with a joke, never seems to take life too seriously, and somehow manages to charm his way out of any sticky situation. In college, he was the guy who organized the best parties and knew all the coolest spots in town. Matt would often tell me stories about their childhood, how Tim was always getting into mischief but somehow never got in trouble because he could talk his way out of anything. Matt and Tim have always been close, despite their different personalities. Where Tim is all spontaneity and charm, Matt is steady and responsible. I fell in love with Matt precisely because of his stability and reliability. We met in our junior year of college when we were paired up for a group project in our business ethics class. I was immediately drawn to his quiet confidence and the way he always seemed to have everything under control. We started dating soon after, and it just felt right from the beginning. After graduation, Matt landed a great job in finance, and I found my niche in marketing. We got married 5 years ago in a beautiful ceremony that Tim, of course, livened up with his best man speech, equal parts hilarious and heartfelt. Life was good, and we settled into a comfortable routine. We bought a cozy 3-bedroom house in the suburbs, thinking ahead to the future when we might start a family. Tim, on the other hand, never really settled down. He bounced from job to job, bartender, sales rep, even a brief stint as a motivational speaker. Nothing ever seemed to stick, but he always landed on his feet somehow. That all changed when he met Laura, 28F, at a mutual friend's wedding 3 years ago. It was like watching a whirlwind romance unfold in real time. Within 6 months, they were engaged, and by the 1-year mark, they were married in a lavish ceremony that, looking back, was probably way beyond their means. At first, everything seemed perfect. Laura was smart, beautiful, and seemed to ground Tim in a way nothing else ever had. He even managed to hold down a steady job as a sales manager for a local car dealership. Matt and I were thrilled. It felt like Tim had finally grown up and found his place in the world. But about 2 years into their marriage, cracks started to show. Tim would call Matt more frequently, complaining about how Laura was nagging him or how she didn't understand his need for freedom. I remember one night when Tim showed up at our door, clearly drunk, rambling about how he felt trapped. Matt talked to him for hours that night, and I thought it was just a rough patch they'd work through. Then, last year, the bomb dropped. Laura called Matt in tears, saying she found messages on Tim's phone proving he'd been cheating on her with not one, but 2 different women. One was a co-worker, and the other was a regular at the bar where he'd picked up some weekend shifts. The family was in shock. Tim had always been a flirt, but no one thought he'd actually cheat. The divorce was ugly. Laura was, understandably, furious, and Tim's charm couldn't talk him out of this one. He lost his job at the dealership when his affair with the co-worker came to light, and suddenly, the guy who always landed on his feet was in free fall. That's when Matt stepped in. He was devastated to see his brother like this and insisted that Tim move in with us while he got back on his feet. I had my reservations. Our house isn't huge, and I valued our privacy, but I could see how worried Matt was. Plus, I genuinely thought it would only be for a few months at most. Tim had always bounced back before, right? Wrong. It's been over a year now, and not only is Tim still here, but things have gone from bad to worse. He managed to get a job at a local bar, but he doesn't contribute a dime to rent or utilities. He claims he's saving up for his own place, but I have yet to see any evidence of that. Our guest room, which I used to use as a home office, has turned into a pigsty. Clothes strewn everywhere, empty beer cans piling up, and don't even get me started on the state of the guest bathroom. What's really starting to get to me is Tim's attitude. It's like he expects me to be his personal maid. He leaves dishes in the sink for days, never does his own laundry, and acts offended if I ask him to clean up after himself. I work from home 2 days a week, and it's become unbearable. He'll wander into the kitchen while I'm on a Zoom call, making noise and sometimes even trying to chat with me. The worst part is how it's affecting my relationship with Matt. We've started fighting more and more about Tim. Every time I bring up that it might be time for him to move out, Matt gets defensive. He keeps making excuses, saying Tim is still struggling with the divorce and needs more time. But how much time is enough? I'm starting to feel like a guest in my own home, tiptoeing around Tim's moods and messes. Last week was the final straw for me. Matt and I had a rare night out together, dinner and a movie, nothing fancy, just a chance to reconnect. We got home around 11 p.m. to find our house had been turned into Party Central. Tim had invited a bunch of people over, most of whom I'd never even seen before. There were empty beer cans and pizza boxes everywhere, someone had spilled red wine on our cream-colored carpet, and I'm pretty sure I smelled weed coming from the guest room. I was furious. This was our home, not some frat house. When I confronted Tim, he just shrugged it off with that charming smile of his and said he was blowing off some steam. What really got to me was Matt's reaction. He seemed more amused than angry, helped clean up a bit, and told me to let it go. It was like he was back in college, covering for his little brother's antics. I don't know how much more of this I can take. I love Matt, and I know he's in a tough position, but I feel like our life is on hold. We've talked about starting a family, but how can we even consider that with Tim taking up space and resources? I'm starting to resent both of them, Tim for taking advantage of our hospitality, and Matt for letting him. I've tried talking to my friends about this, but they're divided. Some think I'm being too harsh and that family should always come first. Others are shocked we've let it go on this long. I'm at a loss. How long am I supposed to put up with this? Am I the asshole for wanting Tim to leave and for expecting Matt to back me up on this? I know family is complicated, and I don't want to come between brothers, but I also feel like I have a right to be comfortable in my own home. Any advice on how to handle this without blowing up my marriage would be greatly appreciated. I'm starting to feel like I'm the crazy one for being upset about this situation. Update 1: It's been about 2 weeks since I posted here, and I have to say, things have taken a turn I really wasn't expecting. First off, I want to thank everyone who took the time to read my post and offer advice. Your comments gave me the courage to finally put my foot down and have a serious talk with Matt about the whole Tim situation. After reading through all the responses, I realized that I needed to make it clear to Matt just how much this was affecting me and our marriage. So, last Saturday, I sat Matt down after dinner. Tim was out at work, and laid it all out. I told him that while I understood his desire to help his brother, the current situation was unsustainable. I explained how I felt like a stranger in my own home, how the stress was affecting my work, and how I was starting to resent both of them. I have to give Matt credit, he really listened. I think seeing how upset I was finally made him realize that this wasn't just a minor inconvenience for me. He admitted that he'd been avoiding the issue because he was worried about Tim spiraling again if we kicked him out. We talked for hours, going over everything that had happened in the past year. Matt opened up about how guilty he felt about Tim's divorce, wondering if he could have done something to prevent it if he'd paid more attention to the warning signs. In the end, we agreed that we needed to set some firm boundaries with Tim and have a serious conversation about his plans to move out. We decided to give him a timeline, 3 months to find a new place and get out on his own. We also agreed that in the meantime, he needed to start contributing to the household, both financially and in terms of chores. So, the next day, when Tim got home from his shift at the bar, we sat him down for what we thought would be a difficult but necessary conversation. Oh boy, were we in for a surprise. As soon as we started talking about him needing to move out, Tim got incredibly defensive. He started accusing me of trying to come between him and Matt, saying things like, "I knew she never liked me and you're choosing her over your own brother?" It was like all the resentment he'd been holding on to just came pouring out. Matt, to his credit, tried to calm things down. He explained that this wasn't about choosing sides, but about us needing our space back and Tim needing to get back on his feet. That's when Tim dropped a bombshell that neither of us saw coming. He claimed that Laura, his ex-wife, had reached out to him a few months ago. According to Tim, she regretted how things had ended and wanted to try and work things out. He said they'd been texting back and forth and were considering giving their relationship another shot. To say we were shocked would be an understatement. Matt and I just sat there, staring at Tim in disbelief. When we asked why he hadn't mentioned this before, he got all evasive, saying he didn't want to jinx it and that he was waiting for the right time to tell us. The whole conversation devolved from there. Matt started questioning Tim about the details, clearly hurt that his brother had kept this from him. I, on the other hand, couldn't shake the feeling that something about this story didn't add up. If Laura really wanted to reconcile, why was Tim still living with us? And why bring this up now, just when we were talking about him moving out? The discussion ended with more questions than answers. Tim stormed off to his room, leaving Matt and me to try and process what had just happened. We spent the rest of the night talking in circles, trying to figure out if Tim was telling the truth or if this was just another one of his ways to avoid responsibility. The next few days were incredibly tense in the house. Tim was barely speaking to either of us, spending most of his time in his room or out of the house. Matt was clearly struggling, torn between wanting to believe his brother and doubting the convenience of this sudden reconciliation. I, for my part, couldn't shake my suspicions. Something about the whole story just felt off. I found myself wondering if I should reach out to Laura myself, just to verify Tim's claims. But then I worried that would be overstepping and could potentially cause more problems if Tim was actually telling the truth. So here we are, 2 weeks later, and I feel like we're in an even more complicated situation than before. On the one hand, if Tim is telling the truth and he and Laura are working things out, that could solve our living situation problem. On the other hand, if he's lying, which, given his history, isn't out of the question, we're back at square one, with the added complication of broken trust. Matt is struggling to know how to proceed. He wants to believe Tim, but I can tell he's also wary of being taken advantage of again. We've had a few heated discussions about it, with Matt accusing me of being too suspicious and me feeling like he's being too naive. I don't know what to do next. Part of me wants to push the issue and demand some kind of proof from Tim about his communications with Laura. Another part of me thinks we should just stick to our original plan and insist he move out in 3 months, regardless of what's happening with his ex-wife. I thought having that conversation with Tim would solve our problems, but now I just feel more confused and uneasy than ever. Any advice on how to handle this new development would be greatly appreciated. Should we believe Tim? Should we reach out to Laura? Or should we just stick to our guns about him moving out, regardless of his claims? I'm at a loss, and I'm worried this whole situation is going to drive a permanent wedge between Matt and me. Update 2. It's been about a month since my last update, and I have to say, things have taken yet another unexpected turn. I know many of you were skeptical about Tim's claims regarding Laura, and well, it turns out you were right to be. The past few weeks have been tense in our household. Tim had been spending more time out of the house, claiming he was meeting up with Laura to work on things. Matt wanted to believe him, but I could tell he was having doubts. We had a few arguments about it, with Matt accusing me of being too cynical and me feeling like he was being willfully naive. Then, about 2 weeks ago, everything came to a head in a way none of us expected. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, and Matt and I were just relaxing in the living room when we heard a car pull up outside. I glanced out the window and saw a woman getting out of the car, looking absolutely furious. It took me a moment to recognize her as Laura. I'd only met her a handful of times at family events, and it had been over a year since I'd seen her last. Before we could even process what was happening, Laura was pounding on our front door. Matt opened it, looking confused, and Laura burst in, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on Tim, who had just emerged from his room to see what all the commotion was about. What followed was one of the most uncomfortable and revealing confrontations I've ever witnessed. Laura started yelling at Tim, demanding to know why he wouldn't leave her alone. It quickly became clear that Tim's story about their reconciliation was a complete fabrication. Not only was Laura not interested in getting back together, but she was actually in a new relationship and had been for months. According to Laura, Tim had been harassing her nonstop for weeks. He'd been calling, texting, and even showing up at her workplace, begging her to take him back. She showed us her phone, which was filled with desperate messages from Tim, ranging from pleas for another chance to thinly veiled threats about ruining her new relationship. The look on Matt's face as he realized the extent of Tim's lies was heartbreaking. He just stood there, looking back and forth between Tim and Laura, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. Tim, for his part, seemed to shrink into himself. All his usual charm and bravado disappeared, replaced by a look of panic and shame. Laura made it clear that if Tim didn't stop contacting her immediately, she would be forced to seek a restraining order. She also revealed that Tim's behavior had been escalating, and she was genuinely afraid of what he might do next. It was a side of Tim that neither Matt nor I had seen before, and it was deeply unsettling. After Laura left, the house fell into a heavy silence. Matt looked utterly defeated, while Tim just stood there, seemingly at a loss for words. When Matt finally spoke, his voice was quiet but firm. He told Tim that he needed to leave, not in 3 months, not in a week, but now. I've never seen Tim look so small as he did in that moment. Without a word, he went to his room and started packing his things. Matt and I just sat in the living room, trying to process everything that had just happened. I wanted to comfort Matt, to tell him that none of this was his fault, but I couldn't find the words. Tim was gone by the next morning. He left a note for Matt, full of apologies and promises to get help, but it felt hollow after everything we'd learned. Matt hasn't spoken to him since, and I know he's struggling with feelings of guilt and betrayal. The past 2 weeks have been strange. Our house feels emptier, but not necessarily in a bad way. It's like a weight has been lifted, but we're still adjusting to the sudden change. Matt and I have been talking more, trying to work through everything that's happened. He's opened up about how blind he feels for not seeing through Tim's lies, and how guilty he feels for putting our marriage under so much strain. I've been doing my best to support Matt, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't affecting me too. There's a part of me that feels relieved Tim is gone, but another part that feels guilty for feeling that way. After all, he's still Matt's brother, and I know how much Matt cares about him. We've had some difficult conversations about boundaries and trust. Matt admits that he let his love for his brother cloud his judgment, and he's promised to be more considerate of my feelings in the future. I, in turn, have tried to be more understanding of the complex emotions Matt is dealing with. The whole situation has made us realize that we need to work on our communication as a couple. We've been so focused on the Tim situation for so long that we've neglected other aspects of our relationship. We've decided to start having regular check-ins where we can discuss any issues or concerns openly. As for Tim, we've heard through the family grapevine that he's staying with a friend for now. Matt's parents are understandably upset about the whole situation, and there's been some tension there. They seem to think we should have done more to help Tim, but Matt has been firm in explaining why that wasn't possible. I'm still processing everything that happened with Laura. It's scary to think about how Tim's behavior had escalated, and I can't help but wonder if there were signs we missed. It's made me realize how little we really knew about what was going on in Tim's life, despite him living under our roof for over a year. Looking back, I can see how Tim's charm and Matt's loyalty created a perfect storm that allowed this situation to go on for as long as it did. I'm hoping that this will be a turning point for all of us, a chance for Matt and me to strengthen our relationship, and maybe, eventually, an opportunity for Tim to get the help he clearly needs. For now, though, we're taking it one day at a time. Our house feels like our own again, and we're slowly finding our way back to the routines we had before Tim moved in. It's not perfect, we still have a lot to work through, but for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful about our future. Update 3. It's been a few months since my last update, and I wanted to share how things have progressed. While our home is finally back to being just ours, I have to admit that my marriage with Matt is still in a process of healing. The whole ordeal with Tim left some deep scars that we're still working to mend. About a month after Tim left, he reached out to Matt. It was a long email, full of apologies and promises to change. Tim said he'd started seeing a therapist and was working on his issues. He asked if they could start over and rebuild their relationship. Matt didn't respond right away. I could see how torn he was. Part of him wanted to believe in his brother's capacity for change, but another part was still hurt and wary of being deceived again. After a few days of mulling it over, Matt decided to send a brief, cautious reply. He told Tim that while he was glad to hear he was getting help, he needed time and space to process everything that had happened. He made it clear that any future relationship would need to be built on honesty and respect, not just for Matt, but for me and our marriage as well. Since then, there have been a few sporadic text messages between them, mostly initiated by Tim. Matt keeps me in the loop about these communications, which I appreciate. It's a delicate balance. I don't want to control Matt's relationship with his brother, but I also need to protect our home and our relationship from falling back into old patterns. As for our marriage, we've been working hard to rebuild the trust and intimacy that got lost in the chaos of the past year. We started couples counseling, which has been incredibly helpful. At first, I was resistant to the idea. I felt like we shouldn't need outside help to fix our problems. But our therapist has given us tools to communicate more effectively and work through the resentment and hurt that had built up. One of the biggest challenges has been helping Matt work through his guilt. He still beats himself up for not seeing through Tim's lies sooner and for putting our marriage under so much strain. Our therapist has been helping him understand that while he can take responsibility for his actions, he's not responsible for Tim's behavior or choices. We've also been working on re-establishing our own routines and goals as a couple. We've started having regular date nights again, something that had fallen by the wayside during Tim's stay. We're also tentatively starting to discuss our future plans again, including the possibility of starting a family. It feels good to be looking forward instead of constantly dealing with the drama of the present. As for Tim, we've heard through family that he's still struggling to find his footing. He's had a few short-term jobs but nothing stable. There are rumors that he's been seen around town with a new girlfriend, which honestly makes me a bit nervous. I just hope he's being honest with her about his past and his current situation. Matt's parents have come around somewhat. After the initial shock and disappointment, they've started to understand why we had to set firm boundaries with Tim. They've been supportive of Matt and me working on our marriage, which has been a relief. Looking back on this whole experience, I'm struck by how much it's changed us, individually and as a couple. There were moments when I wasn't sure our marriage would survive the strain, but in many ways, I think we've come out stronger. We've learned a lot about communication, boundaries, and the importance of putting our relationship first. That's not to say everything is perfect. We still have our moments of tension, especially when the topic of Tim comes up. But we're better equipped now to handle these challenges together. We're more honest with each other about our feelings and more willing to compromise. As we move forward, I'm cautiously optimistic. I know there will likely be more challenges ahead, especially as Matt navigates his evolving relationship with Tim. But I feel like we have a solid foundation now to face whatever comes our way. To anyone out there dealing with similar family drama, my advice would be this: don't be afraid to set boundaries, even with family. Communicate openly and honestly with your partner, and don't let outside influences come between you. And most importantly, remember that it's okay to prioritize your own well-being and the health of your relationship.